"Are you my daddy?" The little girl asked the question so quietly that, for a moment, I thought the steady hum of the airplane had swallowed it. I looked at her. She was 7, maybe 8 at most, with pale skin, soft brown hair, and eyes that seemed strangely familiar. I had spent most of my life surrounded by people who measured every word before speaking to me. People lowered their voices when I entered a room. People waited for my approval before making decisions. But this little girl simply sat beside me in the first-class cabin, swinging her feet above the carpet, as if I were just another passenger on a Tuesday afternoon flight from New York to Chicago. My name is Adrian Blackwood. At 38, I had learned how to make an entire room go quiet without saying a word. That afternoon, none of that mattered, because the moment she looked at me, something inside me stopped. "Excuse me," I finally asked. She blinked, then smiled. "Sorry, you just look like him." "Like who?" She reached into her small purple backpack and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "My daddy." I stared at the drawing. A little girl stood between a woman and a tall man wearing a black suit. The picture was made with colored pencils. The faces were simple. The details were childish. But the man in the drawing had dark hair, a sharp jaw, and a tiny silver watch on his left wrist. I wore the same kind of watch. I had worn it for years. "What's your name?" I asked. "Lily." "Lily what?" She hesitated. "Lily Morgan." The name meant nothing to me. At least, not at first. Then she tucked the drawing away and reached for the small silver necklace around her neck. A round pendant rested against her sweater. My breath caught. I knew that pendant. I had seen it once, 7 years ago, in the hands of the only woman I had ever loved. Emily Morgan. She had disappeared from my life before I ever learned why. I had searched for answers, but every trail had ended in silence. I had eventually convinced myself that some doors were meant to stay closed. Yet now a little girl was sitting beside me, wearing the same pendant Emily had once promised to keep forever. "Where did you get that?" I asked. Lily touched it gently. "Mommy gave it to me." "Your mother?" "Yes." "What's her name?" Lily looked out the window at the clouds below us. Then she turned back to me. "Emily." My hand tightened around the armrest. The airplane continued through the bright afternoon sky. Everything outside the window looked peaceful. But inside my chest, something I had buried for 7 years had just opened its eyes. I looked at Lily again. She was watching me now, curious, calm, completely unaware that she had just stepped into the one mystery I had never been able to solve. Then she whispered, "Mommy said my daddy had eyes just like mine." The first thing I noticed was the way Lily touched that pendant when she talked about her mother. She did not fidget with it like a child playing with jewelry. She held it carefully, almost protectively, as if it carried a story she was not old enough to understand. I looked at the silver circle again. There was a tiny blue stone in the center, surrounded by a thin engraved line. 7 years earlier, Emily had held that same pendant between her fingers while we stood beneath the lights of a Manhattan apartment. She had smiled and told me it was nothing special. I had believed her. Now I was not so sure. "Can I see it?" I asked Lily. She nodded and lifted the chain from her sweater. The pendant rested in her small palm. My eyes moved across the surface. Then I saw the engraving. 2 letters. A and E. My initials. I stopped breathing for a second. "Who gave this to your mother?" I asked. Lily looked confused. "I thought Mommy gave it to me." "Before that?" She thought for a moment. "She said somebody gave it to her a long time ago." "Do you know who?" Lily shook her head. Then she smiled. "She said he was important." I looked away toward the window. Clouds stretched beneath the airplane like a wide ocean. I needed to slow down. I needed facts. Not memories. Not guesses. Facts. "Lily, how old are you?" 7. "When is your birthday?" She answered without hesitation. "October 14th. My chest tightened. October 14th. I remembered that date. 7 years ago, Emily had disappeared from my life in the middle of October. I had spent months trying to find her, then years. Eventually, there had been nothing left to follow. No messages. No address. No explanation. Just silence. I turned toward Lily again. "Where do you live?" "Boston." "With your mother?" "Yes." "Do you have any brothers or sisters?" She shook her head. "Just me and Mommy." Her answer was simple. Mine was not. I had no children. At least, that was what I had always believed. Lily opened her backpack again and pulled out a small photograph. "This is Mommy when she was younger." She placed it on the armrest between us. I looked down. The photograph was old, slightly faded around the edges. Emily stood beside a lake, smiling at the camera. Her hair was longer. Her face was younger. But I knew that smile. I had seen it across restaurant tables, in quiet mornings, and once beneath the rain outside a bookstore in Manhattan. I picked up the photograph with unsteady fingers. Where did you get this? Mommy keeps it in her bedroom. Lily tilted her head. You know her, don't you? I did not answer. I could not. Because suddenly, the question was no longer whether this little girl reminded me of someone from my past. The question was why every answer she gave seemed to lead directly back to the woman I had spent 7 years trying to forget. I did not ask Lily another question right away. I was afraid of what the answer might be. Instead, I handed the photograph back to her and watched as she carefully placed it inside her backpack. The cabin lights had been dimmed, and most of the passengers around us were quiet. Somewhere behind us, a flight attendant moved softly through the aisle. The steady sound of the engines filled the silence between Lily and me. 7 years. I had spent 7 years telling myself that Emily had chosen to leave, that she had made a decision and never looked back. But now a little girl was sitting beside me with Emily's photograph, Emily's pendant, and a birthday that matched the year everything had changed. I needed one more answer. Lily, do you know your father's name? She looked at me for a moment. Mommy does not talk about him much. What does she say? Lily shrugged. She says he was someone she loved very much. My eyes stayed on the seat in front of me. Anything else? Lily thought about it. She says he had a watch. I looked down at my left wrist. The silver watch caught the soft cabin light. Lily noticed it immediately. Her eyes widened. That one. My voice almost disappeared. What? She pointed at my wrist. That is the watch in Mommy's old picture. I slowly removed the watch and held it in my palm. It had belonged to my father before it became mine. There was a small scratch near the clasp that I had never repaired. I had never imagined that a child would recognize it. What picture? I asked. The one in the box under her bed. She paused. Mommy keeps lots of things there. I looked at her. What kind of things? Lily counted on her fingers. Pictures. Letters. A little blue dress. And another necklace. My heart sank. Do you know why she keeps them? Lily shook her head. Then she leaned closer and lowered her voice. She says they belong to someone who is gone. I swallowed hard. Did she ever tell you who that person was? Lily looked down at her hands. She said his name once. What was it? She was quiet for several seconds. Then she looked directly into my eyes. Adrian. The world seemed to become strangely still. I heard the engines. I heard the faint movement of the air vents. I heard Lily breathing beside me. But everything else disappeared. I had not told her my name. Not once. Who told you that name? I asked. Lily looked confused by the question. Mommy. My fingers tightened around the watch. 7 years ago, Emily had vanished without an explanation. Now her daughter knew my name. She wore the pendant I had once given Emily. She knew the watch I was wearing. And she had been born on the same day Emily disappeared. I wanted to believe it was coincidence. I needed it to be coincidence. But deep inside, a quiet thought had already begun forming. What if Emily had never left me? What if she had been trying to leave me something I had never known existed? The moment Lily said my name, I knew I could not pretend anymore. I kept my voice calm. But inside, every memory I had buried for 7 years was coming back at once. Lily, where is your mother now? I asked. She looked toward the window. She is meeting me at the airport in Chicago. I glanced at the small screen above the aisle. We had less than 40 minutes before landing. 40 minutes to decide whether I was chasing a coincidence or standing beside the daughter I had never known. I reached for my phone and sent one message to my assistant, Daniel. Find everything you can about Emily Morgan. 7 years ago. Boston. October 14th. I added one more instruction. Do not contact anyone yet. I did not want Emily warned. I did not even know if she was still the same woman I remembered. Lily watched me type. Are you going to tell my mommy you met me? She asked. I looked at her. I do not know yet. She nodded as if that answer made sense. Then she opened her backpack again. I have something else. She pulled out a small envelope, worn at the corners. Mommy told me not to open this until I was older. My eyes moved to the handwriting on the front. I recognized it immediately. Emily's handwriting had not changed. The name written across the envelope was mine. Adrian Blackwood. I stared at it without touching it. Lily held it toward me. It has your name. Where did you get this? Mommy gave it to me before we left Boston. Why? Lily shrugged. She said if I ever met a man named Adrian who looked at me like he already knew me, I should give it to him. My heart sank. I carefully took the envelope. I did not open it. Not yet. The handwriting alone was enough to make my hands unsteady. 7 years ago, Emily had disappeared without saying goodbye. Now her daughter had delivered a letter addressed to me. I looked at Lily again. Does your mother know you are sitting next to me? No. Does she know my name? Lily nodded. She told me never to say it to strangers. I almost smiled. Then why did you say it to me? Lily gave me the simplest answer in the world. Because you did not feel like a stranger. I looked away. I had spent years building walls around myself. I thought they protected me from disappointment. But one little girl had walked through every one of them. Without trying, the plane began its descent. Through the window, the first lights of Chicago appeared beneath us. I held the envelope in my hand and watched the city grow larger. Then Lily suddenly reached over and touched my wrist. Adrian. Yes. She looked at me with those familiar eyes. If you know my mommy, does that mean you know my daddy too? I could not answer. Because for the first time, I was no longer afraid of discovering who Lily was. I was afraid of discovering who I had been to her all along. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. I kept it in my hand as the plane touched down at Chicago O'Hare, listening to the soft announcement from the captain while Lily watched the runway lights pass beyond the window. I had spent 7 years wondering why Emily disappeared. Now the answer was sealed inside a simple white envelope with my name written across it. I did not open it until we were inside the terminal. Lily stayed beside me, holding her purple backpack with both hands. She seemed completely comfortable. I was the one who could barely think. Are you going to read it? She asked. I looked down at the envelope. Yes. Now. I nodded. We found a quiet seating area near the windows. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was unmistakable. My eyes moved across the first line, and I felt my chest tighten. Adrian, if you are reading this, then somehow our daughter found you. I stopped there. Our daughter. The words seemed to erase every other thought in my mind. I read the next line. I never stopped loving you. I simply became afraid of what would happen if you knew about her. I looked at Lily. She was sitting a few feet away, drawing something in a small notebook. She had no idea that her entire story was sitting in my hands. I continued reading. When Lily was born, I wanted to tell you. I wanted you beside me. But everything around us had become complicated, and I believe keeping her away from your world was the safest choice I could make. I had spent years believing Emily had chosen another life. She had not. She had been raising our daughter alone. I read faster. I told myself I would contact you when things became calmer. Then 1 year became 2. 2 became 5. By the time Lily was old enough to ask about her father, I was afraid that telling her the truth would only confuse her. My hand trembled slightly. Then I reached the final lines. She knows your name. She knows there was a man who loved her mother before she was born. She knows he wore a silver watch. But I never told her that man was you. I wanted her to meet you when she was old enough to choose what you would mean to her. Please do not ask her to call you anything she is not ready to say. Let her decide. I lowered the letter. For several seconds, I could not move. Then Lily looked up from her drawing. Did Mommy write that? Yes. She smiled softly. She writes letters when she misses people. I folded the paper carefully. Lily, when was the last time you saw your mother? This morning. And what did she tell you? Lily thought for a moment. She said she would be waiting at the airport. I looked toward the entrance of the terminal. People were moving through the glass doors, carrying suitcases, talking on their phones, searching for family members. Then I saw her. Emily stood near the arrivals area. 7 years disappeared in 1 second. She looked older, tired, familiar. Her eyes found Lily first. Then they found me. She stopped walking. Lily smiled and ran toward her. Emily opened her arms, but her gaze never left mine. In that moment, I understood something that frightened me more than any question I had ever faced. She had not been surprised to see me. She had been expecting me. Emily did not move. Neither did I. For 7 years, I had imagined what I would say if I ever saw her again. In every version, I had been prepared. I had questions. I had anger. I had speeches I never actually said out loud. But standing there in the middle of the airport, with Lily between us, every word disappeared. Emily looked at me as if she were seeing a memory walk toward her. Lily ran back to her mother and wrapped both arms around her waist. Mommy, I met someone, she said excitedly. Emily closed her eyes for a brief second. Then she looked at me again. I know, she whispered. I stepped closer, but I stopped several feet away. I wanted to respect the distance she had created for 7 years. You knew I would be on that flight? I asked. Emily looked down at Lily. I knew there was a chance. You knew my name was on the passenger list. She nodded. I did not arrange the seat. Then why did you let her sit beside me? Emily took a slow breath. Because I was tired of keeping her from knowing where she came from. Her words landed quietly. No anger. No accusation. Just exhaustion. I looked at Lily. She was showing her mother the drawing she had made during the flight. She asked me if I was her father. I said. Emily became very still. What did you tell her? I did not know what to say. Emily nodded. That was the right answer. I looked at her. Why did you never tell me? Her eyes lowered. I tried. I never received anything. I know. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small stack of folded papers. I wrote to you. She held them against her chest. More than once. I remembered the letter in my hand. Why did they never reach me? Emily did not answer immediately. Because I changed my mind every time I got close to sending them. Why? She looked at Lily. Because I was afraid you would come into her life before you understood what she needed. I looked at Lily again. She was sitting on a nearby chair, humming softly while coloring. And what does she need? I asked. Emily's eyes filled with emotion. She needs to know that she was never unwanted. That sentence broke something inside me. I had spent years thinking Emily had abandoned me. I had never considered that she might have been protecting a child I did not even know existed. Does she know the truth? I asked. Emily shook her head. She knows her father is alive. She knows his name is Adrian. She knows I loved him. But she does not know that you are him. I looked at Lily. She glanced up at that exact moment. Our eyes met. She smiled. I could not help smiling back. Emily noticed. That is why I brought her here, she said softly. Not to force anything. Not to give you a role you are not ready for. I just wanted you to meet her. I looked at the little girl who had somehow walked into my life carrying 7 years of unanswered questions. Then I looked at Emily. And what happens now? Emily took a slow breath. Now you decide whether you want to know your daughter. I looked back at Lily. She was still smiling. For the first time in 7 years, I did not want to look backward. I wanted to know what came next. I do not want to miss another day, I said. Emily looked at me for a long moment, as if she needed to know whether I meant it. I did. For 7 years, I had lived with questions that never had answers. Now the answers were standing 3 feet away from me. Lily looked up from her coloring book. Are you leaving? She asked. I shook my head. Not yet. Her smile appeared instantly. It was such a small thing, but it hit me harder than I expected. I had spent years believing that my life was complete because I had built everything I thought I needed. A successful company, a beautiful home, people who trusted my decisions. Yet none of those things had prepared me for the simple warmth of a little girl smiling because I had decided to stay. Emily sat beside Lily. I took the chair across from them. For a few minutes, nobody spoke. Then I said, I want to know everything. Emily nodded. You will. But first, I need to know if she is really my daughter. Emily looked at me. There was no hesitation in her answer. She is. I believed her. Somehow I did. But belief was not the same as certainty. I needed something undeniable. Not for me alone. For Lily. For the future we were about to enter. I asked Emily if she would agree to a DNA test. She said yes immediately. We arranged for a private appointment at a family medical center near downtown Chicago. Lily stayed with us while we waited. She had no idea why we were there. She simply sat between us, drawing a picture of 3 people standing beneath a bright yellow sun. I looked at the drawing. There were 3 figures. Lily in the middle, Emily on one side, and me on the other. I smiled. When did you draw that? I asked. On the plane. You already put me in the picture? She nodded. You were sitting next to me. Her answer was so simple that I had no response. After the samples were collected, the waiting began. The results would take a little time. Emily and Lily returned to their hotel. I went back to my apartment in Chicago, but I could not concentrate on anything. I placed Emily's letter on the table beside the old photograph. Then I looked at the silver watch on my wrist. For the first time, it felt less like an heirloom and more like a message from a life I had never understood. The next morning, my phone rang. The clinic had the results. I sat alone when I opened the message. I read it once. Then again. There was no room for doubt. The probability of paternity was 99.99%. Lily was my daughter. My hands became still. I had spent years building a life around the belief that I had lost everything that mattered. I had been wrong. I had not lost my daughter. I had simply never known where to find her. Then another thought entered my mind. Lily still did not know the truth. And before I could become her father, I had to decide how to tell a 7-year-old girl that the stranger she met on an airplane was the person she had been waiting for all along. The message on my phone changed everything. I had spent 7 years imagining what it would feel like to finally find the truth, but nothing prepared me for the quiet certainty of those numbers. 99.99%. Lily was my daughter. I read the result again, then placed the phone face down on the table. For several minutes, I simply stared at it. I thought about the first moment I saw her on the airplane. The way she had looked at me without fear. The way she had asked if I was her daddy, as if the question were the most natural thing in the world. I finally understood why her eyes had felt familiar. Why her smile had stopped me. Why something inside me had recognized her before my mind could. I called Emily. "The results are in," I said. There was silence on the other end. "I know," she whispered. "You are?" "Sure. Yes." Her voice trembled. "Then you know." "I know." We agreed to meet that afternoon at a small park near the hotel. It was quiet. There were trees, benches, and a playground where a few families were spending the afternoon. I arrived early and sat beneath a large oak tree. I had faced difficult decisions in my life without hesitation, but this felt different. There was no strategy for becoming someone's father. No perfect sentence. No instruction manual. Just a 7-year-old girl who deserved honesty without having her world turned upside down. Emily arrived with Lily a few minutes later. Lily carried her purple backpack and held a small paper cup of lemonade. She saw me and smiled. "You came back." I smiled at her. I said I would. She sat beside me on the bench. Emily stayed nearby, giving us space. I looked at Lily's face. "Can I tell you something?" She nodded. "Do you remember when you asked me if I was your daddy?" Her eyes widened slightly. "Yes." I did not know the answer then. She waited. I took a slow breath. "But now I do." Lily looked at me carefully. "You do?" I nodded. "Yes." She glanced toward Emily, then back at me. "Are you?" My voice was quiet. "Yes, Lily. I am your father." She did not speak. She just stared at me. For a moment, I was afraid I had said too much. Then she asked the question I will never forget. "Does that mean I can still call you Adrian?" I smiled through the emotion rising in my chest. "You can call me whatever feels right to you." She looked down at her shoes. "Mommy said I should choose." She was right. Lily thought about it for several seconds. Then she looked at me again. "Can I call you Dad someday?" I swallowed hard. "Whenever you are ready." She smiled. Not because I had earned the word. Not because the test had proven anything to her. She smiled because, for the first time, she knew the man beside her was not a stranger. And I realized that becoming her father would not happen because of a piece of paper. It would happen one small moment at a time. For the first time in my life, I understood that being a father was not something a name could give me. It was something I had to earn, one ordinary day at a time. The weeks that followed changed everything. I began with small things. Breakfast before school, helping Lily with her homework, listening to stories about her favorite books and the friends she had made in Boston. I learned that she hated mushrooms, loved strawberry pancakes, and always wanted the blue cup at breakfast. None of it seemed important when I was building my old life. Now every detail felt like something precious I had almost missed. Emily stayed close, but she never tried to control what happened between Lily and me. She let us find our own rhythm. Sometimes she watched from across the room, while Lily showed me another drawing. Sometimes she smiled when Lily called me Adrian. The word Dad did not come immediately. I never asked for it. I remembered what I had promised her. "Whenever you are ready." One Saturday morning, Lily and I walked through a small park near the lake. The air was cool, and the trees were beginning to turn gold. She carried her purple backpack, as always. I carried 2 cups of hot chocolate because she insisted that one was for me. We sat on a bench overlooking the water. "Dad," I looked at her. She immediately smiled. "You said I could call you that when I was ready." I felt my throat tighten. "I remember." She leaned against my arm. "I think I am ready." I looked across the lake because I needed a second to collect myself. 7 years ago, I thought my life had lost something I could never recover. I had spent those years chasing answers, building walls, and convincing myself that silence was easier than hope. Then one ordinary flight changed everything. A little girl sat beside me and asked a question I was not prepared to answer. "Are you my daddy?" I had thought the answer would change her life. I was wrong. It changed mine. I eventually understood why Emily had been afraid. She had not been protecting herself from me. She had been protecting Lily from a world she did not fully trust. I could never change the years I had missed. I could not give Lily back her first birthday, her first day of school, or all the nights when she needed someone to read her a story. But I could be there for her. The next morning, and the morning after that. I could show up. I could listen. I could keep my promises. That became the most important thing I had ever learned. My daughter did not need the man who could control a room. She needed the man who would sit beside her when she was afraid. She needed patience. She needed consistency. She needed a father. And somehow, without realizing it, she had given me something I never knew I was missing. A reason to come home. As the sun lowered over the water, Lily reached for my hand. I held it gently. She smiled and said, "I am glad you were on that plane." I looked at her and finally understood the truth. Some moments do not arrive to change your plans. They arrive to change your entire life.